Section 7.1, How Clients Connect to Pi. Well, first of all, as a user, you're going to need simple network access. So you're going to have to be able to see your Pi server and the specific port 5450, that the server uses using TCP/IP. So you need a network connection to your Pi server. You as a user need to have the right tools, and you need to know how to use them. By tools, what we mean is a Pi client application like Processbook or DataLink or an interface or something like that. You need to have enough knowledge to understand your tags. You may have 100,000, 200,000 tags, Pi tags on the system. And if you don't really know what you're looking for, if you don't know any of the tag naming conventions, it's going to be very difficult for you to make any sense of what you see in Pi. So obviously the more you know about tags, the better. And finally, you have to be able to pass through Pi security. But that's not really saying much. We haven't discussed Pi security at all. What do we mean by Pi security? Well, that's the topic of the next few slides. First of all, let's talk about some of the underpinnings, some of the low-level applications that actually allow us to connect to the Pi server. The first of these is the Pi API and the PI-SDK. The Pi API and the SDK, they're defined, as you can see here, as, quote, dynamically linked libraries that represent platforms on which programmatic access to Pi is implemented. In other words, we have a couple of different methods, a couple of DLLs that allow us programmatic access to the Pi server, and it's upon these two different sets of DLLs that we have built all the client applications. Now, some of the older stuff uses the Pi API. API stands for Application Programming Interface. The SDK stands for the Software Development Kit. It's a much more recent version, and I guess a good way to differentiate the two, the API is more kind of a C-style function library. Remember, this is a low-level set of programming tools. So we built some of the older clients like Processbook 2.0, etc. And most of our current interfaces using this application programming interface, this C-style function library. Now we have a newer, more recent one called the Pi Software Development Kit. And it's more object-oriented. It's more kind of a COM-based object-oriented model where you involve a lot of properties and methods instead of just functions and returning values, etc. But it's the same type of thing. Both of these are two of the same types of things, just one is more recent than the other. They're both the low-level software that we wrote initially to allow an application to get access to the Pi server, to both read data from and write data to that Pi server. Now, as it's described here, a good way to describe the difference between the two at this point in time is any of the older version 2 of the Pi clients and most of our current interfaces were built using the API. The API has its own set of little utilities and files that you would have to know about in order to do troubleshooting, and we'll discuss those in just a few minutes. The SDK is used to build all the system management tools, relatively modern tools, and also all the client tools version 3 or greater. So if you look at Processbook version 3, that's been built using primarily the SDK. Well, that's all I was prepared to say about this, but I do want to admit one thing. At some point, some of you may be saying, well, why in the world do you have two different ways of doing it? Why didn't you just do it one way and just get rid of these two methods? Actually, it has a lot to do with the history of the software. Originally, we developed everything using this older methodology, this API-based methodology, and as we moved forward, we started supporting newer techniques. And unfortunately, as a manager, sometimes you do have to deal with supporting things that are kind of legacy.